Hello, my friends. Welcome back. Today we are playing in my front garden. I am going to be working on my bulb display for my front border, as well as a few enhancements for my dining room patio. And so I want to walk you through what I've purchased, the design that I'm going for, because whenever I add something to my landscape, I want to think about not just like, where is the spot for this, but does this actually fit with the aesthetic and the other plants that I have curated for this area? So, without much further ado, I want to jump you through what I've purchased and a little bit about why I am planting them now in November. Okay, so first things first, I did a big purchase from Brex. Brex is a lovely, lovely bulb supplier. I actually have two of these boxes. This is just the smallest of them. And then I also have a box from Longfield Gardens. And again, I purchased from a variety of vendors. I think it's really fun to show you guys this because I am very equal opportunity. I think there are so many great companies out there, and I love to cheerlead for all of them. So, tippy-toeing through my front border, one of the main things I'm adding today are tulips. And I want to pause briefly on the design topic to talk about why I'm planting them so late. So one of the reasons that I push my tulip planting out as far as possible is because tulips can succumb to a fungal disease called tulip fire. And what's so hard about disease in the landscape is that you can do all the right things and you can still have weather that encourages bacteria and fungus to grow and impact your bulbs. So this past year was particularly bad. I know I actually follow a lot of British designers. So like Sissinghurst Castle in Kent, they had massive tulip fires. So they've had to eradicate some, like even some of their gorgeous like species tulips. They've had to take them all out. Sarah Raven talks a lot about this. She is another like, oof, grand poobah of beautiful flowers. And then one of my favorite designers of all time, Pollyanna Wilkinson, she was talking about this on her podcast with JoJo. It's the Ins and Outs. I will link that below. It's one of my favorite podcasts. And what's so fun is I love listening to her take because we overlap so frequently on how we design landscapes. So all that having been said, I'm finally getting into tulip territory now that we are into November. To give you a brief overview of what I've purchased to enhance my border, I have actually purchased two 20-count packs of Triumph Continental. Triumph Continental is a tulip that I've played with in years past. It already exists in the front border, but it performed so much better on the right-hand side of my landscape than it did on the left-hand side. On the left, I barely had any that came back this past year. There were only just a few down at the end. And so what I'd like to do is the bulk of these tulips will be planted. I would say probably 2/3 I'm going to plant on the left-hand side, and then I'm going to sprinkle the remaining third on the right-hand side to enhance what is already there. This is a very deep, deep, beautiful color. Classic shape. And so if you have watched my bulb design video, this is like my starting point. I start with maybe like a solid color, a singular inspiration point. Triumph Continental is my starting point. And it features this just deep, beautiful, like burgundy-ish color. Now, to layer on top of that, I purchased a tulip that I've had my eyeball on for a while. And a couple of you commented that it almost looks more murky than it does online. And to that, I say bravo. I love a moody flower. This next one is a tulip called Slawa. These are ones that I purchased from Brex. They're big, they're beautiful. I love them. And I purchased 6 packs of 8. So I'm gonna put 24 on each side. And what I love about the Slawa tulip is it pulls in that deepness of the Triumph Continental, yet we get this kind of like a happy surprise with a little bit of this muted orange. So deep Triumph Continental. We get the Slawa, and then comes our next punch. And for that, it's so exciting. This is another one that I got from Brex. This is one of my favorite Narcissus. This is a daffodil called Geranium. It is, okay, if you've never seen Geranium, it's, you can see it actually, I use it in pots a lot because it stands up to all sorts of weather conditions. It is sturdy, it is bright, it is happy, and it blooms forever. This is a type of geranium that has multiple blooms on each stem. So you just get like crazy amounts of range with it. So, and also that bright orange center is going to help kind of pull the Slawa tulip into that color scheme. It's just going to kind of marry everything together. Okay. And oh, I do have one other thing. Okay. Last but not least, this is my Allium bulgaricum. This is one that I mentioned in my previous bulb video. I love this allium. I grew it last year, but I got mine in the ground way too late. I left them in the box too long. All that to say, I did not have a really great allium show. But what I love is I love to pair these with grasses because when an allium emerges, the foliage always looks ratty. It never looks great. And really, like that's just part of its natural growing cycle. So for me, I love to disguise this by burying my alliums amongst my grasses because by the time my allium is blooming and that foliage below looks all ratty and yellow, my grasses are up and running. And so I don't even really need to like worry about it. It no longer becomes an issue in my landscape. So very exciting stuff. We're going to get to work here. You are going to see me use something different today. I'm going to bust out my bulb auger. Now, this is something I don't use all the time, but for me, when I plant bulbs, the auger is just like such a beautiful thing to use because I can lay out my bulbs, I can just speed through it. And when you're planting bulbs, you're planting so many hundreds of them that it can be very laborious to use a shovel. And sometimes you actually don't need to displace that much soil. The one exception to this is if I am planting a big old drift of them, I will sometimes dig out like a 5-foot long drift and then lay everything in and then put everything back in on top. And that is another just beautiful, beautiful way to attack this. So I want to walk you through, I'm going to start in the front border. I'm going to walk you through how I'm going to place these things and we're going to get to work. So friends, let's have a chit chat real quick about our bulb placement. Now I've got two different bulbs like I discussed going in. I have my Slawa and I have my Triumph Continental. The Triumph Continental did kind of okay down here, but as we moved south, that is where kind of like the issues became more prevalent with it just not returning. And that's to be expected. And so when I'm going about and I'm doing my bulb placement, first of all, you don't throw bulbs, but I kind of want to walk through just what aesthetic I am going for. I am not going for what I like to call little tin soldiers in a row. I'm going for something that is very organic, right? So I may do something like this, where I've got bulbs kind of scattered back in. Now, the next thing I'm going to do that I like to do is I like to do my layers one at a time. So what I will actually do, and maybe I'll just go ahead and film this, but you're going to see me go through and I'm going to lay out all of my tulips, make sure those look good. So I'll start with Triumph Continental. Then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to work in my Slawa. Okay, so I have my Triumph Continental here. And then my Slawa, I know I'm doing 24 on each side. And I want it to feel, again, like organic, not forced. And so what I may do here is I may overlap a couple. So I may throw in a couple here like this. And then maybe I'll do one back here as well. And so I have these, essentially these amorphous shapes within the landscape. So last but not least, I'm going to go in with my geranium daffodil. And my geranium daff, I'm actually going to tuck in around my grasses. The reason being is that it will help disguise this foliage. I want this to die back as naturally as possible. And I find that when I hide it in grasses, it doesn't bother my eye as much. So you're going to see me tuck these in with all of my grasses. So without much further ado, I'm going to back you up and we are going to lay out our full bulb display. And again, you're watching me put each layer down individually, watching my shapes. I'm varying them up. I might do a grouping of 3, then a grouping of 5, and so on and so forth. Friends, the next thing that I am planting is an Allium bulgaricum. If you have followed my channel for a while, you would have seen this in my May garden tour. So mine was blooming end of May into June, and it is so beautiful. Just think dreamy little bell-shaped flowers. It has kind of a rosy tone as opposed to other alliums that you think of that are typically purple. And so one thing that I've discussed earlier is I love to hide foliage, allium foliage specifically within perennials and grasses, because those things are really coming on as that allium foliage is not looking its best. And I don't like pressure to clean things up. I want nature just to do its own thing. So I have purchased 2 packages of 20 alliums, and I'm going to sprinkle them in through here, kind of underneath my little lilac. And I'm actually thinking I may put a couple behind me next to the roses and a few down the line here. So I'm just going to kind of stand back and assess. And again, I'm going for organic shapes. I'm going slightly irregular. I don't want things in a neat, tidy little row. And I want enough going around where it's telling the story of what this dining room is meant to be. So I've got all of my tulips placed as well as my daffodils. And what I kind of want to express to you is that this isn't an exact science. So I'm going to have 7 tulips here. Then I'm going to have a cluster of 9. And maybe I'm going to have 8 down at the end because I just had 1 left over and I wasn't going to waste one and force myself into only having 7. So but the overall arching theme is we're looking for organic shapes. We're looking kind of like to build these amorphous blobs of daffodils and tulips so that it feels more natural. And then as nature goes to multiply these bulbs and naturalize them, it'll take off in a very organic direction. So to give you a very concrete example of what I'm doing, down here I have 7 tulips that are mixed, Slawa, and continental. Next up right here, I have a group of 9. Back over here, I have a group of 8 because I had 1 extra and I didn't want to throw it away. Coming down the line here, we've got another group of 11. Down here, we're back to 7. And last but not least over here, I've got a bang-up mashup of 11 different tulip bulbs. So again, we're just going for a nice flow. We're mixing it up. We're creating shapes in the garden. Nothing too precise because Mother Nature just literally would never do that. I also have all of my tulips planted on this side, but I want to walk through and kind of give you an example of my daffodil numbers using this side as an example. Looking at my daffodils, I had fewer of them and they have multiple blooms per stem. So it kind of sometimes feels like more. But to give you a concrete example of what I am talking about, I started off down here with 5. I moved to 3 here. I've got another cluster of 5 kind of wrapping around the back side of this grass. And then on this final grass, I have 3. And then flanking either side of the entry, I have alternating numbers of tulips, and I have probably 3 daffodil bulbs on each side, just to give a little bit of a smattering, because as we turn down that main walkway, that's when my thalia story is going to come on, which I am so very excited about. So right at this corner, wrapping this area, this is where my color story ends for my front walkway. And what's really fun is I have utilized that Narcissus geranium with the white outer petals so it transitions seamlessly to all of my miniature white daffodils that lead to the front door. Friends, quick planting primer on bulbs. Essentially, you are going to plant your bulb 3 times whatever size this is. That is the depth that we're going for. So this little sucker here, just shy of probably 2 inches, we're going to go 6 inches deep. So if you're doing like a teeny tiny something like a crocus, you're only going maybe 3 inches deep. So go ahead, use your best judgment. All bulbs are different sizes. It's always an approximation. So for a frame of reference, when I planted this side, that was about maybe 50 bulbs or so, and it took me about 15 minutes with my auger. So this is where that bulb auger is kind of worth its weight in gold. I will link the one that I have in my Amazon shop. This is an inexpensive bulb auger. I have been really curious about the power planter. I bought this one earlier on in my career, and it served me kind of just fine. However, I will say that my soil conditions are not insanely rocky, and I generally don't hit clay that's so thick that I can't use this one. So I will link below what I got. I'm gonna plant out the other side, and then we'll move on to the alliums. Oh, by the way, this is about a 3-inch auger. I find that this does a pretty darn good job. 3 inches will fit just about anything. I do have to say though, if I order particularly large daffodil bulbs like the white lion that I used the other day, or gosh, if I'm planting alliums, this one, we're stretched almost beyond the limit of what it can do. With really large bulbs, I think a 4 or a 5-inch auger would be better. So that may be the next thing I add to my arsenal. Friends, it is getting late and I'm getting punchy. So I'm going to go inside and charge this little battery because I'm going to be at it again this week. More bulbs going in. Yeah, I got a couple hundred more on the horizon. All right, I'll see you in the next one. In the meantime, go say hello to your garden for me.